Welcome to Conversate, our podcast where we engage in conversation. And on this week's episode, I, Aaron, and Kevin are talking about our most recent trip to the Best Practices for Ministry conference and just some topics that are piquing our interest right now about sharing Jesus with other people, ways that he's providing for us as your pastors to do that. And hopefully in these stories, you're being inspired and will be inspired to have relationships with other people, that your conversations would be centered around Jesus, that the joy of the Lord would be your strength, and you'd be overflowing with great joy as you go from this listening to this conversation to go and starting other ones with other people. As always, it is our goal that you'll take something you hear and go and start another conversation with somebody else. As always, we hope you enjoy it. Hey, buddy.
Hey. What's up, Aaron? Welcome back. Welcome
you
back.
You as well.
Oh, thanks, man. It's good.
Yeah.
Dude, it honestly is so good to be back.
Where were you?
I was in a sunny Phoenix, Arizona, basking under the blue skies.
Yeah. We were there together, kind of, but not really.
That's right. Yeah, it pretty well sums it up.
We did not travel together. It was after our last podcast where we talked about, how Kevin's flying and talking to people and stuff. I realized, you know what? I need to book it out of a separate airport. Not even a different ticket. Like, gotta make sure that there's no possibility of being on the same plane.
It's too bad we didn't have a connecting flight.
That would have been funny. We both had a layover in Denver, and then
that would have been fantastic. I was wondering about it. I was like, was Aaron the secret to my mojo? Because on the way out, I didn't have any of those kinds of conversations. Really? I was like a little sad, a little disappointed.
You were trying to impress me with talking to all those people.
Exactly. I had no one who could be in on the spoof.
Yeah.
But I had so you flew out of Minnesota, I flew out of Milwaukee. Same day. We flew in on Tuesday of last week.
Yeah. And this was it's called the Best Practices for Ministry conference. I don't know how many years it's been going on.
I don't either. Yeah. So Molly went. So my wife went, and that would have been somewhere between 2014 and 2016.
Yeah.
So yeah, at least 10 years.
Yeah, it's around there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a conference of like 3,000 people. This local church there, Christ Lutheran Church right in Phoenix, sees it as their kind of mission project. So they host the whole thing, and it's free to go to, and they provide all the food and all that stuff. So you just got to get there and provide for your lodging. But it's an incredible gift to the church.
Yeah, an immense number of volunteers.
Oh my goodness.
From parking and shuttling to just welcoming and greeting to, like Aaron said, providing the food as well. So preparing and serving. That way, it's a slick production.
Well, the hospitality is it's top notch. And so, I think one of the goals for the conference is to remind people that you're not alone. And it can be very easy. I think somebody was in the church to think like, well, we must be the only Christians out here doing this thing.
We're the last bastion.
It can feel like that, where we live right here in the tip of the peninsula. But a lot of people feel like that. And so it's just good to gather and be like, well, there's lots of people, striving, harvesters, doing good work in the kingdom. So, if nothing else, that's kind of just an encouraging thing.
Yeah, and then at the conference, the presenters are actually people who are in the trenches, if you will, doing work and ministry in various contexts. And so, if you want to present, you just submit your presentation to the folks over there at the church, at Christ, and then they send that out to everybody who's intending to go, and they kind of just do a voting system, and that's how you end up with the speakers there at the conference.
Yeah.
And I'll have you know, I'm sitting next to one of them.
Yeah, it was cool. I actually presented for the first time last year on basically like the multiplication of disciple makers. So we've talked about that here on this podcast, and we will again and again and again. It's something that we won't get tired of speaking about, but that, as we go about the Great Commission of making disciples, that is, learners, followers of Jesus, that being a disciple ought to also mean eventually those disciples become disciple makers again. It's a reproducible process. So just as children grow up to be adults who become parents themselves, disciples ought to grow up to become disciple makers. All right. Just, it should be that way. Unfortunately, a lot of times we don't build people up in that kind of manner. A lot of times in the church, I think we talk about like spiritual growth or growing in our faith, which is not bad. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but unfortunately we kind of have this individualistic a faith walk, where it kind of sort of ends with me being a disciple, and then somebody else is going to help make those other people become other disciples. Yeah.
And the neat thing, really, I think, when I think about your pathway to this year's presentation, is it sort of actually models that, if you think about it, because at the last year's presentation, there was...
Yeah, I was going to...
Yeah, go for it. I'll share the story.
That. Yeah, so I presented last year on this multiplication of disciple makers. And then as a result of that, I offered to follow up with anybody to actually like live this out with people. Actually, 0 people responded last year, but a couple months later, I got contacted by someone who's a principal in the Milwaukee area in Waukesha, Wisconsin, who was actually at my presentation. She was a principal at a Lutheran school, and she was in charge of hosting the principals conference last fall, and asked me to come and present kind of that same thing, but how it could affect principals and teachers in the Lutheran schools. So I seized on that opportunity and went and did that last fall. And as a result of that, have continued a rapport with her name is Jenny. But the topic of that presentation was how to share Jesus with the unchurched families in our Lutheran schools. And it was convicting enough to me, just thinking about for those of you who don't know, there's a lot of Missouri Synod Lutheran schools and childcare centers like we have here all throughout the country. I've got statistics on how many people are actually involved in these. It's close to it's around 100,000 students across the country, and about 50% on average students who are in Lutheran schools are unchurched, like have no church affiliation whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so it's just a reminder, this is the reason that we have our early learning center here. It's not just to
provide.
It's not just to provide care. I mean, it is a felt need in the community, but it's a ministry of our church, a mission of our church. We want all these kids and their families to know that how Jesus loves them and died for them and rose for them, whether or not they become members of the church or not. We want to connect them to Jesus.
Yeah.
And
we've even seen in our context, I'm thinking of 3 different scenarios where there were people who got connected to our worship life, and one of those from unchurched or non-Christian.
Oh, a couple. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's just in the short lifespan of our early learning center here. And so I imagine more and more of that will come as we become more and more intentional about this. But anyways, kind of across the board in our Lutheran schools, this is what an incredible mission opportunity that God is just placing in our laps. And so a lot of people don't know what to do about this though. Cause our Lutheran schools, a lot of times were sort of developed, not necessarily to be they're developed to be mission minded in a way, but mostly to train and develop Christian people to be, as I was saying, sort of mature Christians.
Sure.
But not necessarily seeing it as a mission field of well, we've actually got, non-Christian, unchurched people right here in our schools.
Our doors. Sure. Yep.
Yeah, I was talking to a retired teacher at the conference. Works in alumni relations with Concordia St. Paul, where I graduated from, and I know her, and was talking about my session, and she said, "Oh my goodness, like I was a teacher in a Lutheran school for 20 years, and I treated every student as though they kind of already knew Jesus, and in my eyes, it was just sort of all the same." And she was just like, she missed so many opportunities to engage lost people with the good news of Jesus Christ. And she was like, "Man, I lament some of that." So whatever you can do to help these teachers or principals and pastors and stuff to think about this. So anyways, yeah, so that was the impetus. Then my session at Best Practices this year then was how to share Jesus with the unchurched families in our Lutheran schools. And it was heavily attended, particularly by, as I would assume, people who are involved in like school ministry. There were a number of teachers, principals, childcare workers, preschool teachers, and pastors of those kinds of schools, and lay people. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
What's the takeaway? What's the silver bullet? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, the silver bullet is there isn't one.
Yeah.
Just as there isn't in the church. This is what I had to keep. I kept coming back. I kept coming back to this over and over in my presentation, as I've said here, and will continue to say, like discipleship, evangelism, these things, like the way that we share the good news of Jesus. It's not a class that we offer. It's not a program that we run. It's not a curriculum that you work your way through and get a certificate. It's not something just to be accomplished by some committee that you elect and say, "Ooh, we have a evangelism committee now, so that's handled."
Yeah, they're doing it.
This is something that every one of us who is a follower of Jesus ought to have impressed upon our lives. And so I broke it down as we do that really, like, if nothing else, we should have 3 key relationships in our lives. Every follower of Jesus, that we have someone who's discipling us in an intentional manner, raising us up into that maturity of becoming a disciple maker. And we need that because a lot of us don't know how to make other disciples, and we don't know how to evangelize people because we never really had somebody doing that for us.
Sure. Yeah. That hasn't been modeled. Yeah.
And that's okay to say, like, I had a follow-up conversation with a guy, a classmate of mine, who I think I'll be doing some ongoing work with, but lifelong Lutheran guy, has the catechism memorized, is at a successful school. And he was readily admitting, like, he doesn't know how to share his faith with the unchurched people in his school. He doesn't really know what to say. He's got it memorized. He knows he's got all the Great Commission memorized, but doesn't know how to translate that into just real conversation.
Yeah.
Well, and like, I'm not even saying that I like, and this is what I was trying to express. Like, again, the title of my session was "How to," which is a little misleading because
you clickbaited him.
I did. Because it's not really, there's not like not a precise how-to manual, like how to win people for Jesus.
Right. Here's the 5 steps.
Yeah. That would be misleading. But I do believe when we're being discipled by somebody, that's some of our accountability plate, our structure, and also like our training ground to have conversations about Jesus. But then we should also have somebody that we are discipling, and what we mean by that is somebody who already knows Jesus, but it's like a in a child type state, just somebody who needs to be parented a little bit. I needed that even as a pastor.
Yeah. 100%.
I still do, right? So
yeah.
Anyways, so somebody that we're discipling, and because this is the thing. Like, again, so many of us are concerned about the lost, about those who don't know Jesus, about those who are far from Jesus, but we don't know how to. We don't know how to have those conversations because we haven't practiced it anywhere.
Sure.
And like, I know this from being a pastor, but teachers know this from becoming a teacher. Like, you become an expert at your field when you actually have to teach somebody else about it.
That's like when you do the most learning. Yeah. When you're teaching.
Yeah. Before that, it's all theoretical. You actually got to do something about it. So when you're discipling somebody else, that's a safe place. It's somebody that already knows Jesus. We walking together to the place of maturity, holding one another accountable to this walk with Jesus and this great commission task. And so that's a great training ground to actually practice having these faith conversations.
Yeah.
And then through that, eventually you're still praying for these lost people around you, these unchurched people. And then you realize, I can have conversation. Like, I know that person. Well, yeah, let's talk Jesus.
Yeah. It's not such a big leap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was like the simple framework. And this is applicable whether you are a teacher, whether you're a pastor, whether you're a principal, whether you are a janitor, whether you're a bus driver, whether you're a mom, whoever you are, like, just think about those three key relationships and just start there.
Well, yeah. And that's actually why I wanted you to kind of break it down for us, because I mean, even for folks listening into the podcast, whether you're retired, whether you volunteer over here or over there, whether you regardless of what your field of vocation is, like this invitation, this call for Christians applies to us all, and we all have opportunities, and we all have people that God is sort of weaving into our lives, and that's kind of the wild thing. It's hit me more on the nose here in the last 2-3 weeks with some of the things, some of the conversations we're having here at our congregation, and then going to best practices as well. But just like some of the stories that come out of, like, this is ridiculous that I even know this person. I mean, the path from, your session to this session and kind of the relationships that lead you there too. It's like, you can't map this out, Right. We're not formulating this process. God's the one animating it all, but these practices are so useful for, giving us a sense of confidence. Also, there is spiritual growth in that process too. Because like you said, when you're teaching someone else, you're also learning,
Oh my goodness.
Like sometimes the thing you're teaching someone else, you're like, oh man, I needed to hear that.
But then the cool thing is when you're teaching them, if you've got that relationship where you're still a student and being discipled, you don't have to have all the answers.
Right. You have someone to go to.
Yeah. And that's the most honest thing. It's like, oh man, you got a question? I don't really know, but I'm still a student too. And so let me check, let me ask, I'll come back. Let's learn together. Like, what a cool thing. You're not alone.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and thinking of that metaphor of kind of the biological child, parent-child relationship, when it comes to discipleship, the first thing you said was how important it is to have that discipler over you who's walking with you in the faith. And you think about, what a challenge it would be to not have one of your parents or either of your parents biologically. Yeah. And does that mean you can't be a parent? No, you can. You can go get married. You can have kids. Yeah. But there's going to be some real significant challenges there unless you have someone who, who's kind of helping you along the way. I mean, going back to the same idea, right? We both grew up in the church, right? We both had lots of resources for our faith. I also grew up in a household with both my parents, and so I had lots of resources when it comes to parenting. Yeah. Did I know what I was doing when I became a parent? No. Or at least I didn't feel like I did. There's all these questions, And so having that relationship so reassuring, and there's someone you can say, hey, I'm dealing with this, or I don't know how does this work, And someone who has walked in faith for much longer than you have, or maybe just in a different, has been given, this kind of growth that can help you along. What a gift that is to see it modeled for yourself, to then give you that confidence to go out and do.
Absolutely. But then, the parenting model is so strikingly similar.
Yeah.
Because I have matured in life. I know it may not seem like it, but I have a wife and 4 children at a minimum. But I still have my parents. I'm still their child, and I still need them in my life because they're retired now and they can watch my kids. So
I was going to say, can leave. We used them just this last week.
Yeah, exactly. for all the things grandparents are good for.
Yeah,
ice cream and popsicles. And cookies.
There you go. That's right. What's not to love?
Keep them happy.
They might have it's been at best practices.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, and this is yeah, even on like a sociological level, like we all need community, and the church is meant to be that community.
Absolutely.
But I think, there's probably a number of things we could attribute it to, but we do live in a more isolated culture, a more individualistic culture. I think there was likely a time, perhaps even in our own traditions, history, where there was more discipling going on. I mean, Martin Luther, when he writes the Catechism, he's raising up leaders because he doesn't write it to just say, all right, learn this and that's it. No, he's giving it to the heads of households and saying, teach this. So he's already modeling this idea of, you are discipling your children.
Absolutely.
So these are such great reminders, and such a helpful framework, especially if, and I guess this is me mostly speaking out of my own experience, because my cards on the table, this discipleship thing is also relatively new. Yeah. I mean, this was not language I was using until I came to Saints Peter and Paul. But through my time here, I've also recognized that I've sort of pined for deep relationships in the faith where there's trust and there's someone walking with you. And it's, so like what I'm trying to say is if you've been a Christian for a long time, but you still kind of feel like you don't know what it's about or like how to apply it, or you want more out of it. I think this is one of the ways, maybe the most considerable way it comes to life. It has for me anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And those of you who are who consider Saints Peter and Paul your home, your people, your family, your church membership, we're gonna be talking more and more about this, building more and more opportunities for you, invitations coming. So just be on the lookout and be in prayer about next steps for yourself. So yeah. So
well, and then sorry, just roping it back into this whole idea, and back to my earlier comment of being sad about not being able to talk to strangers on the way out to best practices. Okay. Just to kind of give a little bit of a piece of like how God can have people around you on the way back from. So sorry, little context. When I travel, I like to strike up random conversations with people. I get a real kick out of that someone is forced to be next to me for several hours with nothing they can really do.
It's brutal.
Yeah, it's the best. And but I didn't have any conversations on the way out. I was also kind of tired and, wasn't whatever. But then on the way back, it was my first flight. So I had two flights. But the first of those two, I ended up sitting next to this woman named Jody. And I was just doing my normal chat, get chatty with the people next to me thing. But it wasn't long at all before, and I don't remember how we even stumbled into it. And that's the funny thing, is like when you get talking to people, especially if like you listen, like you'll be surprised what people tell you.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised the kinds of things, and maybe it's like the park bench thing, like the Forrest Gump thing. It's like, hey, I'll never see this person again, so they're safe or something. There's like less risk involved. Sometimes it's harder to talk about things with people we know. But she opened up about her experience of, she was part of the Church of Latter-day Saints growing up, and she actually started digging into her faith. Like she was asking questions, trying to understand the doctrines of the Mormon Church, and she was silenced by that. Like the bishop who she went and talked to basically said, stop asking questions, and eventually visited her in her home, papers of excommunication, which translate like they would in our denomination too. That's like a paper of condemnation. So the message is like you will not go to heaven, and that was basically her last religious experience. So since then, and she was young, I know she was like, I didn't get like a timestamp, but maybe late like high school, college, or early 20s, that kind of a thing. So it's been some time. And that was kind of it. So she was an atheist. She wasn't antagonistic. She was very open to the conversation. I told her, it's kind of like putting a Surgeon General's warning on something, I'm like, hey, at any point, if you want me to be quiet, just tell me. Just stop talking.
Just out of curiosity, just for clarification.
Please.
Did she say she was an atheist?
Yes.
She used that word?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. She used that word.
I wonder if, I think some people throw that around, but to literally be an atheist is a bold statement. That's saying that you believe there's no God.
That's right.
I think some people who claim to be atheists are actually agnostic,
right?
Which is like, I don't know.
Right, exactly. Agnostic is the idea that, well, there could be.
Right.
There's more. And yeah, like based on her demeanor, there was quite a bit of openness, at least to the conversation.
Right.
But anyways, yes, we had a night. I mean, it wasn't the whole flight. It was a lot of it. And I told her thanks for listening to all my monologues. But you know, the nice thing was I got to model for her when it comes to Christianity. By all means, ask your questions. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of discipleship too. Like you probably have questions. Yeah. Ask them.
Right.
Let's explore. Let's dive into this. We don't have a fear about it. You know, and so, you know, got to share a bit with Jody, and like that's just my little piece. But the neat thing she shared too was she had just started this new job 4 years ago, and so she was on a flight out to this new site with her work, and apparently her boss is a Christian, and had been like articulate about like, I'm going to work on you. Wow. Like that bold. It was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, she shared that with me in like, yeah, with some levity. Like it wasn't something that was, you know, she wasn't feeling pressured or something like that. So yeah, neat that I could come alongside and be a part of his ministry too, towards her. But like, again, I'm just on a plane, you know, it's like, I wanted to have these kinds of conversations on the way out. They didn't happen, you know? So it's like, you don't strategize. It's not like you can target things, but when we pay attention either to like the people who we just regularly interact with, you know, it could be family. When we pay attention to the questions people are asking or the things people are saying, I don't know, there's a lot of room for kind of these questions and opportunities to share the hope that we have, especially if you're faced with people who just don't have that, like don't have a sense of peace or a sense of like a goodness of life. I mean, those are some of the strongest promises we have in Christ, is that no matter what we're facing, we can have hope, you know?
Well, I think that's the thing. Like, as you say, when you listen to people and the felt needs that people express. Well, I mean, what do you hear most often? It's I'm afraid about this. I'm worried about this thing. I don't have, you know, I don't have peace. I'm stressed out. I don't, you know, I don't know where to look for a hope. This thing's got me down. I mean, Jesus comes to tend to the brokenhearted, to bind up the brokenhearted. And it's not the Christian gospel is not just a social gospel of like, you know, Jesus comes just to meet our felt needs. However, the gospel also meets our felt needs.
Yeah, right.
You know, the fruit of the Spirit. It's not multiple fruits. It's the fruit. You get
them all.
You get all of this.
Yeah,
you
bundled deal.
Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. I mean, wonderful.
Yeah,
wonderful gifts, right? And so Jesus promises to deliver these things when his Spirit enlivens people, and I've been privileged to see this life transformation happen in people, and to see lives transformed by simply believing in Jesus. Like that, yeah. I don't know how to say that any other way, but that is what the Bible declares, right? Believe, right, and you'll receive these gifts, and so it's remarkable, right? The grace of God in Jesus Christ. Like, I just think if I think maybe too often we don't come to grips with our own depravity, or especially especially if you've grown up especially maybe if you've been a Christian your whole life, like it's just been what you've known, what you've done, all that stuff. It can be hard to like, if you don't have like a true conversion experience, you know, you can be like, I don't know, I just kind of grew up with this stuff, and so this is what I do, you know. But I mean, for those people who who convert to Christianity, they have a very clear, like, I was lost and now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see.
Right.
But that reality is all of our reality. Now, I mean, I don't have some like road to Damascus conversion experience myself. But I can only imagine, and especially I get to this place by knowing people who don't know Jesus and seeing seeing their lack of peace and lack of hope and lack of joy. But I can only imagine what life would be like without Jesus in my life. How lost I would be. Like I mean, he's everything. And so so coming to grips with that reality, like ought to move us out of incredible joy and gratitude for the love that he has for us to share it with the world, right? Now again, I think all of us hear that and we're like, yes, of course. But what do I do? What do I say? And this is why we need those relationships in our lives who are walking with us, modeling to us, teaching us, training us, giving us a ground to put it into practice.
Yeah. Even sharing stories. Sometimes that's so helpful, just to hear, this is what it looked like.
Yeah.
You know? And here's some of the goofy things that came along with it, you know? Right. And getting a sense of like, oh, okay, so there's a myriad of ways this shows up and looks like, and you know, because sometimes we can kind of count ourselves out, if you will, right? Where it's like, oh, I don't think it did anything, or I don't know that I could do anything, or, you know, it's like, well, let's slow down here. I was talking to a guy at Best Practices. He was working on his parents, praying for his parents. He grew up in a culturally Buddhist home. 17 years it took for his parents to convert. 17 years. That's a long time. That's a long time. But stuff was happening all the way through, you know? So it's like, don't count yourself out either. And I think when we're connected to others and getting to hear those stories and being encouraged, that helps kind of keep us reminded of that God's still working and he still uses us as his promise, you know?
And when the parables of Jesus with the lost coin and the lost sheep and these things, you know, the angels in heaven rejoice over one sinner who repents. It's like the incredible joy of seeing people turn to Jesus and have life transformation for all of eternity. It's like that's incredible joy. Like no greater joy. And so that ought to continue to inspire us, and like, man, so many people in this world living life in a living hell, destined for an eternal hell. And so there is an urgency for sure, and yet also like sometimes we're overwhelmed by perhaps by the urgency and the great need that's out there. We got billions of people dying without Jesus, and I'm like, I don't even know where to start. You know, well, just one.
That's right.
Just one.
Bring it back. Jesus saved the whole world. You don't have to.
Yeah, one lost coin.
That's right. Yeah, just one.
One lost sheep. You know? Yeah.
That's good, man.
Yeah, it's good stuff. We're a little divergent from our typical conversate theme, but you know what? Next week we'll wrap stuff up. But this whole conversation is all about like being gifted.
That's right.
For the good of others, right?
That's right.
Putting into practice all these wonderful things. But
that's right.
But yeah, we'll be wrapping up our conversation on that 1 Corinthians. Well, I don't know if we're wrapping it up next week, but anyways, there's some summary stuff coming.
Yeah, we're coming to the final section anyway.
Yeah,
this Sunday.
Yeah. So we'll look forward to that conversation next week, I think. And in the meantime, go do good things. You're gifted for good.
It's good to be back with you, and you're not alone.
Amen. Peace,
brother.
Jinx.